For a lot of people, The Witcher 3 is undoubtedly one of the best games of all time, with one of the most extensive and emotional stories out there. But upon completing my most recent playthrough, I realized that wasn't the only thing that kept me coming back. The other key reason why I still enjoy going back to the game, even almost 2 years after its initial release, is for its deep and rewarding combat system and incredibly detailed and diverse bosses you can find throughout the entire game. That being said, here's my list of the best boss fights in The Witcher 3. Just keep in mind, there are an absolute ton of them, so if you guys have any that differ from mine, I'd love to hear them. Up first at number 10, we have the Shale Mars from Nilfgaard. What's great about this fight is that it'll most likely be the first time you encounter a beast like this. And better yet, the fight takes place in an arena with an entire audience as witness. Arguably, something Geralt doesn't get all too often. Also, due to Shale Mars being completely blind, this one's forced to make up for that by using echolocation and turning itself into a giant ball of death that not even Indiana Jones could escape. And best of all, should you finally bring down the beast, you'll have the option to either end its life or let it live to fight another day.
Master Geralt, do what you must. Finish the deed!
And either way will end up having you earn the respect of the crowd. At number 9 is the Cloud Giant, and a fight not all players will get a chance to take part in. But for those who decide to look for Sienna and travel to the Land of 1,000 Fables in the Blood and Wine expansion, you'll be forced to put yourself in the shoes of Jack and climb a massive beanstalk to face one of the coolest enemies that this game has to offer. To add to the difficulty is the giant's ability to disappear below the clouds and then pop up whenever you least expect it. Position yourself correctly though, and you'll be able to give the giant a nice shock as well. Plus, if and when you finally slay the beast, you'll be granted a reward any Witcher would be happy with.
I need a man, Geralt, and I'm not afraid to say it.
No, not that. I'm talking about the golden donkey shit. Moving on to number 8 is the Wild Hunt's very own Caretaker, a foe you'll most likely see several times throughout the game's main story. However, it's not until the very end that you'll finally get a chance to go head to head with him. And what makes this fight even better is the fact that you're able to face him as both a Geralt and Ciri, making for one of the longer boss fights you'll find in The Witcher 3. He also has more than a few useful abilities at his disposal, such as the option to summon elementals, but once again, good positioning is key in this fight, and should allow you to use them to your own advantage, and in the end, send Caretaker to a very watery grave.
Welcome, child of the Elder Blood. We knew you would return.
Your taste lingers on our tongues.
Taking their spot at number 7 are the Crones, most likely one more enemy you will have seen at least a few times before this final battle. And admittedly, one of them on their own would be a handful for just about anyone. So it's no surprise that even as Ciri, this ends up being one of the more challenging boss fights that you'll run into. And to add to that pressure, the struggle against the Crones takes place in the blood-red heart of Bald Mountain, making for an even more unsettling atmosphere. And you never know, depending on your ending, this may not be the last you see of the Crones.
A bit of butter, a bit of spice, and you'll make a tasty morsel. just as soon as I catch you.
Up next at number 6 is the Wicked Witch. She might not be as grotesque, nor as challenging as the Crones, but I've always found her abilities to be a bit more unique and enjoyable to go up against. And those included flying and her lust for dropping toxic soup on you as she zooms by. To make matters worse, not only will you need to fight her, but you'll also have to face her broom as well. And a quick word of warning, if you do end up killing her, just don't drink the soup. There's a good chance there might be a few kids who wound up in there. Eating its way to number 5 is the Toad Prince, easily one of the toughest creatures you'll have to kill throughout the Hearts of Stone expansion. This fight takes place in the dark reaches of the Oxenfurt sewers, which just so happens to be an extremely fitting home for this monstrous amphibian. And what makes this one great is that it's a prime example of a fairy tale gone wrong, which you'll soon discover as you come across the countless bodies of those who have tried to lift the curse and transform this hideous beast back into a charming young prince.
Another unfortunate romantic came to lift a prince's curse, found a hideous death instead.
And seeing as how the toad has an extremely poisonous tongue and a deadly amount of weight behind every jump, I'd say they serve as a proper warning sign to any who dare make the same mistake. All the way at number 4, we have yet another creature from the Hearts of Stone expansion, and this one goes by the name of the Caretaker. He's neither man nor beast, but definitely not something you want to mess with. When it comes to the Caretaker, not figuring out his ability early on can prove fatal, as it allows him to summon the spirits of the dead to feed on, and as a result causes his health to regenerate. With nothing but a mouth, this is without a doubt one of the more disturbing enemies you'll face, rivaling even that of the Crones. But should you put him to an end, you'll be rewarded with a very powerful spade and a chance to fulfill Olgierd's last wish. And now at number 3 is one of my personal favorites, the Ice Giant. To me, everything from the tales you would hear beforehand to the journey across the island of Unvik were what really made this boss fight so worthwhile. In a way, it really felt as though you were tracking down a creature like King Kong on Skull Island. And rightfully so, when you take into account the giant's sheer size and the fact that he uses an anchor as a weapon. Additionally, for this fight, you'll be accompanied by Hjalmar and whoever else you can muster up on the island, making for a truly unique experience compared to most of the other fights that Geralt finds himself in. Above all that, if you somehow manage to bring down the giant, you'll be granted with the new title of Geralt the Giant Slayer by the people of Skellige.
You fought brave to the bitter end.
I trust this time will be no different.
Sitting in at number 2 is Lorath, another warrior of the Wild Hunt. Personally, I always found him to be the most difficult out of the 3, and I found the journey up to Bald Mountain was also a very neat trek on its own. For a lot of people, this is going to be a very revenge-filled fight, especially when you consider what he did to Vesemir. The fight against Lorath is also an ever-changing one, centered around his massive shield and powerful attacks, that sort of makes you feel as though you'd have a better chance bringing down a castle wall than you would him. but ultimately results in one of the sweetest moments you'll encounter throughout the entire game.
Who taught you to fight like this?
The Witcher you slew.
And really quick before we get to number 1, I wanted to bring up a few honorable mentions that just barely missed the cut. First of which is the Wraith from the painting, who proves to be a very troublesome enemy if you don't figure out its tricks that allow her to heal using the various portraits. And additionally, another great boss that barely missed it was the Spoon Collector, whom unfortunately is only available to fight if you end up getting what most people would consider the bad ending. But nevertheless, this Spotted Wight embodies a lot of the same abilities that made the Cloud Giant so fun to fight, and in this case all of which are executed in her own personal Sea of Spoons. And now, last but certainly not least, we have at number 1, Ronvid of Smallmarsh.
Prepare for battle! You shall not have it easy this time!
No, relax, I'm only kidding. This guy was easier to kill than most neckers. Clawing his way to the real number 1 spot on this list is Detloff, a higher vampire that will prove to be a painful fight no matter how good you are. And for good reason too, since this fight will most likely be the last one you take part in during your time in The Witcher 3. Consequently, it includes facing off against all 3 of Detloff's many forms, as you do your best to dodge the bats and long claws he sends your way, eventually leading you into a segment in which you'll have to literally try and cut his heart out. With all his abilities, killing Detloff is no easy task by any stretch of the imagination, thus making severing him in half a truly rewarding experience. And in the end, that's why I find him to be the number 1 boss fight in all of The Witcher 3. That being said, guys, I'm very curious to hear which fights you found to be the most enjoyable, so feel free to bring those up down in the comments. And thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you did end up enjoying the video. And as always, I will see you in the next one.